light the fire. You place the flowers in the vase that you bought today. Staring at the fire for hours and hours while I listen to you playing your love songs all night long. Only for me. Come to me now and rest your head for just 5 minutes. Everything is done.
Welcome to the First Cable Home Buyers Seminar. I'm Nicholas Kemock, and during the next hour, we hope to assist those of you contemplating the purchase of your first home and inform those desiring to move on to your second and third home. In the past few years, we have seen dramatic and drastic changes in the buying and selling of real estate. Questions and uncertainty abound regarding the methods and practices of buying, selling, and financing, and protecting your home. We hope to help, and we hope you will join us.
The most frightening thing about this house, and others like it, is that they can go unsold for 6 months, 8 months, even a year, haunting their owners with a financial nightmare. That's why ERA Real Estate developed the Seller's Security Plan. And if you qualify, we'll assure you that if we don't sell your home, we'll buy it. The Seller's Security Plan, another reason we're selling houses.
Joining us today on our panel are Fanny Brackett of Page One Realty in Strongsville, Mr. Robert Brown, President of the Great American Mortgage Company, also in Strongsville, and Mr. Ray Salco, an attorney and the head of the real estate department at Cuyahoga Community College West. Welcome to you all. I suppose the best place to start is to assess the real estate market. Fanny, what's happening in real estate today?
We've had a substantial increase in the activity. Probably it's due to the lowering of the interest rates and the apparent economic recovery.
There's been a substantial decrease in the interest rates, you say?
Yes, there has.
And financing, I suppose, is still the basis of all real estate transactions. And that brings us to Mr. Bob Brown. Bob, could you give us some idea of the basic types of financing that are available for the prospective buyers?
Nick, there's a whole multitude of programs that are available. By far, in the current market, the most popular is the FHA program, which is open to many more people than some of the other programs are. But beside the FHA program, we have the VA program, we have the conventional programs with the fixed-rate mortgage. FHA does have a number of programs that have a variety of different things that affect different buyers and different types of housing that are also available.
Ray, Bob has given some idea about the conventional forms of financing. We hear a lot these days about the creative financing methods. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, creative financing, unlike conventional financing where you may go to an institutional lender, begs on the borrower to go to the owner, perhaps, for that financing. And in that light, several kinds of arrangements can evolve. Number one, you could have the purchase money mortgage, where the seller acts as the bank in lending money and therefore taking back a mortgage on the property. Perhaps a land contract could come into play. Here, title does not transfer to the property, but yet there is an interest going to the buyer, and when that contract is fulfilled, title will transfer. Other kinds of creative financing have evolved, such as perhaps a lease option, lease purchase, where we merely tie a lease to the subsequent purchase of the property.
Are these creative methods used as commonly now as they have been in the past?
Well, when you say past, perhaps 2 or 3 years ago, they were used extensively, probably to get around the higher interest rates that abounded. But today, with the conventional rates going down, the creative side has become less attractive. But still, there are isolated cases where we'd want to use that creative financing.
Perhaps could you give an instance to our studio audience of where a land contract might be used?
Well, possibly in a low down payment situation where funds may come down the road. Let's say there's a probate, and let's suppose it's going to be 2 years before this probate is settled, and the buyer then will have funds available. So the land contract would be a very good situation where, in fact, the financing will come about, but in the interim, a land contract will suffice.
Okay, Bob, I suppose that with the FHA financing, the down payment requirements are could you give us some idea what the down payment requirements are?
Well, basically, the maximum single-family loan available under the FHA program, Nick, is $70,500. The first $25,000 of sale price, the buyer need only 3% of that amount. Over $25,000, he needs 5% up to the maximum loan amount. And plus his closing costs, which estimated about 2.5% of the mortgage amount.
Well, thank you very much for that introduction to an overview of the real estate market. When we return, we'll be discussing in particular the amount of down payment that is required and how we go about qualifying a buyer who is a first-time buyer purchasing real estate and all that is required in establishing a purchase agreement.
After just getting settled into the home of your dreams, you could suddenly be surprised by some expensive problems like faulty wiring, defective plumbing.
That's why ERA Real Estate offers you the Buyer Protection Plan. It protects the homes we sell against costly repairs.
Now, don't you just wish you'd had the ERA Buyer Protection Plan?
It's another reason we're selling houses.
Okay, welcome back. Okay, we're ready to start looking for our home. What is the first step, Fanny?
The first step, and probably one of the most important steps, would be to find an experienced realtor.
I kind of expected you to say that, Fanny, but I suppose it is very important when you're entering into a contract. It requires a substantial commitment to engage the services of a professional. Okay, let's suppose that our prospective buyer has contacted you. What do you do first?
We sit down and talk very casually, but also at the same time we're obtaining information, pretty much qualifying as to the style of home, the size of home, the location, which has to do with the employment, how close it is, the hobbies of the children, anything that would be very important to the family. Also at the same time we do determine the purchasing power, what they're able to purchase as far as price, also the amount of the down payment that they have. Once we get all this information, then we go to the computer, which most of the offices do have a computer now, and in this computer is stored all the homes that's on the market in the Cleveland area. We can put the specifics that the family requires or desires into the computer. Then eventually we can come out with that special home.
I see. Is it possible for you then to sell any home that's listed on the computer?
Oh yes, we do co-broke. One real estate office could have the house on the market, be representing the seller. We could have the buyer and being another office. Then we join forces and work together.
I see. So you compile a list of homes that perhaps a prospective purchaser would like to see, is that correct?
Yes.
And then what do you do?
Then, of course, we choose the ones that best suits their needs, and we do show them some homes. Once the home is decided, then we do write an offer for this home, which we call a purchase agreement. In this offer, we put the price, the terms, the time, any special conditions that might apply.
Okay, once you have formulated an offer of purchase from the would-be purchaser, what happens next to that piece of paper?
All right, then the agent meets with the seller.
And where does this usually take place?
Most of the time in the seller's home. It could be in an office, but most of the time in the seller's home.
And who is present at that meeting?
Well, of course, the agent that wrote the offer to begin with. If it happens to be a co-broke, then it would be the listing agent. So there could be two agents there along with the seller.
And then you present the offer to the seller. Is that correct?
Yes, we discuss and analyze the agreement to see if all the conditions are acceptable. At this time, then the seller has the option to accept this agreement. They could reject it, or if there's any part of it that isn't suitable, for instance, time, they could counter that.
Counter, what does that mean?
A counter is if the price isn't exactly right, if it's not enough money, they can say, well, you know, this is acceptable providing the purchase price be whatever figure they have decided that is acceptable.
And then what do you do with that? Let's suppose there is a counter offer made by the seller. What happens next?
If there is a counter, then that leaves the buyer open to not accepting this or not going along with it. So then we, of course, have to take it back to the buyer, present this counter, see if we can possibly work it out to meet the seller's request.
I presume that most purchase agreements have some kind of provision with regard to financing. Is that true?
Yes, we always write the type of financing because that does have a lot to do with whether or not the offer is acceptable.
Well, let's suppose that this particular offer had a FHA type financing contingency in it. What would happen next?
Well, we just make it known in the purchase agreement that it is an FHA offer. Then, of course, the seller realizes that there might be some additional cost to them. They do have to obtain financing. The home has to appraise. For an example, if the couple has a purchasing ability of like a $60,000 home and they have $5,000, it probably would be advisable that they would go FHA because of the down payment requirements with this home and their $5,000. They could have their down payment, which would be, in this case, about $2,500.
I see. So now we switch back over to Mr. Brown, or where he now takes the contract at this particular product. Mr. Brown, what happens next?
Well, actually, the process of approving a borrower unfolds into about 4 different steps. Essentially, we're interested basically in the property qualifying and meeting all the FHA criteria. FHA has been and is less than they were, kind of hard-nosed on the quality of the property. There are 5 areas of this property that they're particularly interested in. They're going to make sure that the borrower is buying a property that's structurally sound. They're looking at the plumbing, they're looking at the wiring, they look at the heating system. They're very concerned about the roof, they're very concerned about the exterior of the property, the type of siding, if it needs paint. So these areas all become a factor in the ultimate appraisal of the property. Basically, they will appraise. It's a market appraisal. They attempt to appraise at whatever the going market price is. So it's not a cost appraisal. The second area that's of real importance to a lender and obviously to FHA is the credit underwriting, so that we understand the man's credibility. We understand and hope that he has the ability to repay the debt that he's taking on. But these are the 2 basic areas. However, we get into other areas. We want to determine his employment, if he has substantial employment on a continuing basis. We're interested that he has the funding to close the loan, the available assets. And these are the areas that we're really concerned about.
In Fannie's offer, in our pretend contract here, we have a $60,000 purchase with a $5,000 down. Is that sufficient down payment to secure FHA financing?
Very adequate, yes. That's one of the things that FHA is good, the low down payment requirement.
What are the requirements, down payment requirements in FHA?
The first $25,000 of sale price, the borrower only needs 3% of that amount as a down payment, which we're talking $750. That portion over $25,000, in your case up to $60,000, he would need 5% of that amount as a remaining down payment. Then you add the 2 together to determine your total down payment.
Okay, we hear so much about points. Do you want to take a moment and explain what points are and who pays them?
Yes. You can get into many ramifications when you talk about points. Lenders call it discount. It's one and the same thing. A point is 1% of the amount of the mortgage. And that's the amount that we look at in determining the total discount in the deal. Points are paid by the seller. with rare exception, except in case of refinance where the borrower can pay the points.
We hear also about the assumability of loans. Could you tell us something about that?
All insured mortgages, now I say all VA and FHA mortgages are assumable by any borrower. There are no credit requirements, there's no credit investigation. Any mortgagor, a borrower, at some subsequent date can let somebody assume that obligation.
I see. And it could be several assumptions.
It can go on forever. And lenders are very happy with assumptions because that means there's one more loan that we're keeping in our servicing portfolio. So they'd rather have a loan assumed than paid off. So we're very happy with assumptions.
Okay, in our contract here now, we now have a buyer who's approached you, and you have done an appraisal on the property, you've done a credit evaluation of the buyer, and then presumably this package is presented for an approval.
Right.
Okay, after we have the approval, what happens next?
Well, once we have our approval, we advise the realtor who is involved, we advise the buyers that their loan has been approved. At this point in time, we take our documents and we will appoint an escrow agent and send the package off to him for the final closing process.
Okay, so the third step and the final step in this thing is the escrow.
Correct.
Well, Mr. Selko, Ray, what is escrow?
Well, escrow is the process by which all the paperwork that has come through the various brokers, financing agencies, to be culminated into what we call close. And the escrow agent then therefore is responsible for assimilating all the paperwork and having it come together. In that, what will take place is that per the contract, the seller is to deliver what we call marketable title. Now, marketable title basically means that the property is free and clear of defect, or at least most defects, which are certainly unacceptable to the buyer. So to ensure that the property is free and clear or marketable, a title search will be run. And a title company is normally employed to run this title search. And as a result of this title search, defects may be found. Now, defects which may make title unmarketable would include such things as liens, encroachments, easements, which are objectionable. All these things which must be then cleared before title will transfer. Now, should it be found that there are no defects on the property, then information will be going to the title company, who will thereby issue the policy in the form of either title guarantee or title insurance, owner's fee policy, as we call it. But the point is, it's upon that delivery of the deed will take place.
So a buyer can be pretty well assured that after they've completed the appraisal of the finance company, of the lender, and the escrow agent has transferred the property, that he is receiving a property that is fairly clear, it's clear of defects. Is that true to say?
As far as the protection can go at that point in time. And again, the policies go to ensure that protection. So if there would be defects found, in most cases, they would be covered under these policies.
See, what about the cost of the escrow itself? Who normally pays those fees?
Well, on most conventional deals, we typically split the escrow fee, whatever it may be, half to the buyer, half to the seller.
I see. Okay, well, we have some idea of the home buying process from the looking for the appropriate home, entering into a purchase agreement, having the property properly financed, and then finally closing it in escrow. When we return, we'll have some questions from our audience that remain unanswered. We'll be right back.
I have confidence in my ability, but it takes more than personal skills to succeed in real estate today. That's why I joined ERA Real Estate. We've got the muscle.
The muscle means exclusive services like the buyer protection plan.
The muscle means the best trained people in the business.
The muscle can mean a successful career in real estate for you.
If you're talented, interested, and not afraid of hard work, call ERA Real Estate. We've got the muscle.
Welcome back. We have a few questions from our studio audience to our panel of experts. Fanny, what is the standard commission rate for selling a home?
The commission is negotiable. We'll take 7, 8, 9, 10%.
Ray, here's a question. It says, my neighbor has agreed to sell me the parcel between our homes. He said that a verbal agreement is sufficient. Is that true?
Well, it may be sufficient if, in fact, a license wishes to be created between the two. But the problem with a license, if that's what they're driving for, is that it truly is revocable by the person who granted such license. So if there was a continuum of ownership, it makes sense that this agreement not be oral or verbal, that it actually be put in writing. Now, just as we discussed the purchase of a home, this transaction would be conducted in the same way, in the sense that there might be a purchase agreement, there might be maybe financing, I don't know, but certainly there would be the question of marketable title, and was it clear, was the title clear? So the process, as we talked before, would be applicable here and should be carried out in the same exact way, to conclude with delivery of the deed, even for that small parcel.
I see. And Bob, I have two questions for you. The first one deals with issue 1 that you might remember from the past election, and the second question deals with a veteran who is purchasing a home who has already purchased under the Veterans Plan. Could you answer those two questions?
Well, I'm not sure what you want to know about issue 1, but I can say that the first part of the total allocation, which is a little under $500 million, will be ready. It's an amount of $200 million ready sometime the end of May for those lenders who wish to participate in the program. I think it's really almost tokenism because it isn't going to be stretched out very far, really.
The second question deals with a veteran. A veteran has already purchased a home using his eligibility. Can he ever use his eligibility again?
Absolutely. For many years under the VA program, which was enacted in 1944, once a veteran used his entitlement, he could not use it again. About 10 years ago, I think it was the 1974 Housing Act, the government said that he could use it indefinitely as long as he pays off any prior loans. So it's reusable.
Here's a question for Mr. Salco. I'm presently considering entering the real estate profession. What are the educational requirements?
Nick, most recently we received so many phone calls at the college asking that question, and the response is surprising in the sense that the initial requirements to become a real estate salesperson have not increased, and I add, have not increased. Today, presently, only 2 classes at an accredited colleges would be required to set for the salesperson's exam. And those 2 classes, number 1 would be Principles in Practice, and then secondly, Real Estate Law. And upon completion, successful completion of those 2 classes, then one may set for the real estate salesman's examination. Now, upon successful completion of that examination, within 2 years, they're required to take 2 more classes. But it's only upon successful completion of that examination and being licensed that they would need the added classwork. So again, let me reiterate, only 2 classes are needed presently today to take the salesperson's examination.
Okay, how often is the examination given?
It varies. Most recently, we've had a change in site from Cleveland to Columbus. Now, this is, we believe, a temporary thing. We don't know for sure. Hopefully for those testing in Cleveland, it is temporary. So with everything being moved to Columbus, we see that it's up in the air, but presently there's 1 test per month.
I see. It's my understanding that every real estate salesperson in Ohio must be affiliated with a real estate broker. Is that still true?
Oh, definitely. Each salesperson is in the employ of a broker right from the beginning. So even prior to taking the examination, the salesperson must be sponsored by a broker. That sponsoring broker is saying to the prospective salesperson that once you pass the examination, you will be in my employ. So again, all salespeople must be associated with a licensed real estate broker.
Okay, perhaps this is a question for you, Fanny. If I wanted to be affiliated with an ERA broker or with your broker, how would I go about doing that?
Well, I can give you a number, 238-8300, that a person could call and ask for my broker, who is Bill Athens. and he would be able to tell the person what steps would be necessary.
I see. We have time for a final question here, and this is directed to you, Fanny. From a buyer's standpoint, am I better to contact many realtors in the area, or should I work with one realtor who I feel comfortable with?
You should always work with one realtor, especially we at ERA are trained extensively in all phases of the real estate transactions. We do spend the necessary time with the buyer so that he may purchase the home of his choice. And probably he would get better service to stick with one person, one realtor.
I see. Okay, we would like to thank Fanny Brackett of ERA Page 1 Realty here in Strongsville, and Robert Brown, president of the Great American Mortgage Company, also of Strongsville, and Mr. Ray Salco, attorney at law, head of the real estate department at Tri-C West. And we'd like to thank you for joining us this evening, and we hope that we have been of some assistance in helping you make what will probably be one of the largest investments in your life. Thank you again. Good night.
Light the fire. You place the flowers in the vase that you bought today. Staring at the fire for hours and hours while I listen to you play your love songs.